This clip is sponsored by Med Travelers. If you're an SLP interested in travel therapy, visit medtravelers.com to get started. What is your philosophy when you initially start working with a student, and whether that was when you were in the schools or private practice, how do you establish the curriculum? And I know this is going to be different on age and what's going on, but just what is your philosophy, I guess, for establishing a curriculum for language processing?
So everybody, that's another thing that people ask me for a lot. They want a hierarchy and they want a curriculum. And so I 100% understand why people want that. It's what I wanted, but a curriculum in itself is not really what SLPs need in order to do their jobs well. Because it's the teacher's job to deliver the curriculum. They're the ones that are, and not that it's scripted, because teachers modify things all the time, but it's a little bit more about, okay, here's the curriculum, here's what's expected at each grade level based on what we know about developmentally, what should be happening. But also with the curriculum, it's partially about exposure, because a lot of times people want to know, like, when you're thinking about a curriculum, you want to think about what's age appropriate. And I always tell people that's not the right question to be asking. We don't want to say what vocabulary words are age appropriate and what language skills are age appropriate at third grade, fourth grade, etc. What we want to say is, what are kids being exposed to and what are the expectations that they need to do in order to be successful? And because a lot of language growth in the school age years is more dependent on exposure, because you're not going to know vocabulary that you haven't been exposed to. So really the question that we want to be asking is what are kids being exposed to, and then what are the things that they need to do in that environment in order to be successful? It's not about what's age appropriate. There's actually I actually tried to find a developmental milestones chart for school age. It doesn't exist. And actually, I found a seminar article it was back in the 70s of they looked longitudinally at what language skills were, again, like what did language development look like across the school age years? And it was just really hard to pinpoint, because the minute you say this is what you have to do at this age, it becomes irrelevant, because it's going to be so varied based on neurological profile, geographic region, and all of those things. And so if you tried to really pinpoint it like that and do some kind of scripted curriculum, it might be relevant for a small group of kids in one specific geographic location. But if I were to create something like that and try to give that in one of my courses, it would create more work for the SLPs, because they'd have to modify it so much. So really what you need is not necessarily a curriculum, but more of a framework, because what we want to do is, number one, we can't do a curriculum because that's too rigid. Like, it's too scripted. It won't work, because we already know our kids need something different that wasn't working in the curriculum. That's why they're on our caseload to begin with. But at the same time, we can't do the other thing, which is have nothing, because then it's so overwhelming, and that will take hours and hours. There's no way that you can start with nothing. So you need to find some kind of a happy medium. So that's why what I teach is more of a framework. And the way that I look at it is that, so we've got vocabulary as this one big umbrella area. And then I teach people how to use vocabulary from the curriculum and build language processing through word study. And I do that by emphasizing 5 components that fit under vocabulary. And then within those components, have some specific strategies that I can cycle through. And so the 5 components are phonology, orthography, morphology, semantics, and syntax, because those are going to be the things that are really going to build that vocabulary and those language processing skills that are going to support academics. They're going to support reading and writing. They're going to support executive functioning. And so those are really the things that we want to focus on. But it's kind of like you go from vocabulary, big umbrella, and then we specify into these 5 components, and then we pick strategies that facilitate these components, and then just kind of cycle through them. And so that's what I teach SLPs to do. And by creating that, I'm not saying, I will have SLPs come into my program, and I'll give them this sequence of things that they can go through, and they'll say, well, but my student needs this. Can I modify it? And I'm like, yes, of course you can modify it. What I'm giving you is a starting point that I know will work. I'm not saying this is the only possible way that you can do things, but what I am doing is I'm narrowing this down for you so that you can just, have less decision-making fatigue and have more energy to show up for your students. So that's really how I look at it. And that's really what helped me back when I was, in the trenches trying to figure this out. That was what I used to finally get to the point with some of my students where they were making progress.